Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today we're going to be setting up my new Woodland Mills HM130 Max sawmill. And I am really excited to finally have my own mill here on the property. But I'm a little bit concerned that a setup video might be boring. So to prevent that, throughout this video I'll be telling jokes, juggling, and explaining the single bullet theory with cups and string. Now, a few days ago, I put out a video building this stand right here to set the mill on. And I think it turned out really nice. Since that video was published, I have treated this with a gallon of Thompson's water seal. It's kind of odd because I picked a really light finish on purpose, but because I'm using it on a different type of wood, it turned out much darker. So, this is several shades darker on this rough sawn oak than what it looked like on the can, but that's all right. Anyway, first thing I gotta do is clear the site where this is gonna set and get it moved over there. So let's get started. Now, if I'm gonna level this thing, according to the instructions, the spot it sits needs to be level. And I'm gonna start off using the transit level to make sure this area is level. I thought before I did it, I'd go ahead and tell our first story of the day. And it involves two of my favorite things, which is tractors and sawmills, rough cut lumber. So, this is a story about a wooden tractor. And that sounds hard to believe, but it was really a wooden tractor. It had wooden wheels, a wooden engine, a wooden transmission, and it wouldn't run. I set the transit to the center because that seemed like the high point, but it's the same height on this side as it is in the center. It's maybe 2 inches low over there. I am still going to bring the bucket in here because it's gotten wavy over time, and if one of your legs is sitting on a little bump, it's going to throw you off. So we'll get this leveled up real quick and get started. Is almost perfectly level. It's really well packed. I think this is going to make a really good home for the sawmill until I can build a dedicated sawmill shed. Now we know the ground is level, but I've never put a level on my stand. That is about as level as I can get. This is a 6-foot level, and I've checked it in a bunch of different places. Pretty darn close. I guess I'll say one more thing about leveling. There are leveling feet all the way down the mill. So you can set it on an uneven surface and level the mill. But I don't think it would be smart to just let the mill do all the leveling and say we're setting it on a little bit of a slope and our stand is twisted, and we'll just compensate for all that with the mill. I think leveling at every step is the best bet. I've stalled long enough. Let's cut the straps off that box and see what we got in there. I don't know what I was thinking, expecting this box to be light. Ugh. This is the track extension, which we probably won't need till the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay that down over here. Here we have a pack of 10 extra blades. The big reveal is the box inside of the box. So I just started ripping the cardboard off this, pulling all the boxes out. I realized how heavy this saw head's gonna be. Decided maybe I should slow down a minute, find the instructions, and go through this one step at a time. So it's got a canister right here on the side. Screw the top off, and inside of that is your owner's manual, your assembly instructions, and an owner's manual for the engine. So I'm gonna take a lunch, start reading this manual, maybe watch some other videos on it, and get back to this here in a little bit. According to the instructions, the first thing you want to do, take all the boxes out like I started off with. Second thing you want to do is unbolt this section of the crate and lay the mill head back onto 4x4s with cardboard. That requires two 13 millimeters. The reason you have to lay that back is the way it's balanced in the crate is these two boxes are supporting the head. Once you roll that back, you can unpack those two boxes, which I believe are the bottom rails and are the first thing you actually assemble. So when I watch a setup video or I picture doing this, these rails seem like this light little thing at the bottom, but I mean, each piece of this is heavy. This box had our 2 log clamps. Those things are heavy too. I don't know if I thought this was gonna blow away or what, but I keep being surprised. Also in this box, we've got some connector plates. They go between the rail sections. Now, the manual tells you to put 4x4s across where you're building it, and that's not because it's supposed to set on those, it's because you're going to need to put bolts underneath the rails. So I've done that, and I've got 4x4s spaced out all the way down this just to hold it up long enough to get these bolts in and to get the feet put on. What's in this box right here is a track extension, which is basically a repeat of the 2 boxes I just opened. One nice thing I didn't realize is all of these track sections are exactly the same. It's 2 sections that come with the standard kit. The track extension is identical. There's no A and B. There's no left and right. You can't do it backward. You just lay them all out with the wide part facing in, and then everywhere there's a joint, these have 8 holes. The ends of the rail has 4 holes. You put these under here and use it to bolt the sections together. And that's why you want this elevated. After we lay out the rails, the next thing we do is set the bunks in place. Now these bunks look fairly similar, but some of them have 2 holes and some of them have 4. The ones that have 4 holes go in the joints where your rails come together because you're bolting to both rails. The ones that only have 2 holes go in the center of a rail section. And at each end of your mill, you have this bunk that's a little different and does not have the stainless steel plate, wear plate for your logs. So then you go through and lay them all out. Then you're going to get your M10 by 25 bolts that go through your center log rest or log bunks, and then the longer M1035s go where you're clamping your 2 rails together because you also have the thickness of the plate. And the nice thing about all these bolts is every bag has a little card in it that tells you the bolt size, so you're not having to figure that out as you go. We went through the whole mill and put all of the bolts in, just finger tight. Now we need to run them down till they're snug, and then we're going to square the mill. Once they're all square, we'll use an impact driver to tighten them all the way. All the bolts are in and snug. Now it says the outside to outside measurement of the rails should be 37 inches. I didn't know how much movement there would actually be, so I tapped them in and out. You can get between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch of movement, so you can go a little past or a little short. So we went all the way down it. We've lined the edges up where the pieces go together to get 37. And measured it at every joint, and we're 37 all the way down. Now we need to take some diagonal measurements, and the picture shows that happening at this corner, but with these on, I don't know how you would measure that corner without attaching something. So I'm going to measure from this point right here and go diagonals. So we have 230 inches on this diagonal, 228 on that. So to shorten this diagonal, we'll move this entire rail that way, and there's 2 inches difference between it, but moving it 1 inch should square them up and get 229 on both. So I'm just going to tap on the end of the rail from that end till we get 229. Now we're 229 1/8 in each direction catty corner. Make sure we're still 37 here. All right, I think we're all squared up. Now we can actually tighten all these down. I was getting ready for the next step, realized I put these on wrong. There's 4 sets of holes here. Your end bunks go on that outside set of holes. Pretty clearly shown in the instructions. But if you were watching me do it, I did it wrong right here. So I got to move these 2 out, and the one on the end I've got to move out. Now that the frame's complete, we're installing the legs. These go through a set of larger holes that run the length of the rail. For the regular mill, you would have 6 on each side. With the extension, I've got 9 on each side. So you're going to stick the long bolts through the feet. These are M16 by 120. And then you've got M16 nuts. First, you put the bolt through, tighten the nut down. Then you run this down most of the way, put it through, put a nut on top. And go all the way down both sides doing that, removing these blocks. And then we'll start leveling. Now we just got to lift them up, take all the blocks out. Don't lift it too high. I did it too.
I did it too.
Shouldn't take this a tiny bit. Okay, now we got to start all the nuts on the top, but we're not going to run them all the way down because we still have to level this. The next step in the instructions is using these nuts to level the mill. But before we do that, I'm going to do something it doesn't tell me to, which is attach these feet to my stand. Most people probably aren't setting this up on this type of stand, but mine is so high up in the air and I'm intending to use big logs, I really want this to be secure. And I thought about just using wood screws, but it's a lot of weight. And so I've got these lag bolts. I think these are 1/4 inch by 2 inch. They just barely fit through these holes, and 18 feet, 4 lag bolts, 2-inch lag bolts per foot. Gives me 72 lag bolts. I think that'll be pretty sturdy. So I got my son-in-law here to help. Stepped on a rusty nail, which is my fault. And, you know, he asked me, like, should I get a tetanus shot? And I said, yeah, later, after we're done. ain't gonna rot off tonight. So he stuck around. I gotta give him a little bit of credit. I've been singing La Cucaracha, but we're gonna do that off camera. Now is about leveling. I got a 6-foot level. The longer your level, the better it's gonna work, or easier. We're just a tiny bit higher on this end, so we need to raise this one. We also need to check across here to see if we want to raise this or lower down there. It's going to be a little bit tedious checking level across this way at every spot and lengthways, but just take our time and get it right. Okay, so we're going to call this one ground zero and set everything from here going the other direction. Which this one has about 3/4 of an inch of thread above it. Needs to keep going up a little. We're getting close, but the top's tight again, I think.
Yeah, it is.
We'll have that halfway threaded off, but I don't want to move them all down. Okay, brought that up till it touches, tighten them all down. Okay. And then hopefully we can just level the other side off this side, and then we'll get our final measurement going the other way tight. Next thing is these saw stops. Looks like they go right on here and keep the wind from blowing your saw head off. But every mill I've went to, they said make sure you put vice grips on this channel to stop your saw head from rolling off the end. Well, it seems like it'd have something built in, so we'll find out if that's actually works for this. Next, we're attaching the log clamps. We're going to slide the actual clamp over this pipe, and then we slide this piece on, and these will attach with the same bolts that we used for all of the log bunks. I figured it'd be easy to do this without the actual clamp in. So the next step here is squaring up the log stops. I drop my log stop in, tighten it down with the T-handle, and if it's not square when I do that, I can run these bolts into 2 holes in the back. I'll get the camera around here where you can see what I'm talking about. These are just adjustments for squaring the post. And I'm just going to screw them in there just enough that they'll stay. But I am going to check all of them, but the first 2 have been square enough. Which way?
Go that way. So push that way. There you go.
I mentioned this earlier, but this really is great. The tag on that, just by picking these bags up, I can see exactly what's in there. These are the M12 by 80 millimeter. There's also M12 by 90s and M12 by 110. But having them bagged separately with the identification card is fantastic attention to detail on taking a complicated assembly and making it easier. And so far, the instructions have been fantastic. Now, we've got 2 of these. You stand them up this way, but it says make sure, let me read it again. Be sure the bolts point outward and the carriage wheels are positioned on the inside of the legs. So, this one must go on that side. Now, this is why it tells you to have this about 6 inches up in the air. As if this was 6 inches, it would line up. I've got it on 4x4s. So I'm going to have to raise the saw head just a little bit to get these bolts through. I accidentally figured out the easy way to do that because I was going to try lifting the mill head until this other bolt lined up, but because this L-shaped bracket's against the ground, just by pulling back on it, it leveraged and lifted it up to the hole. Okay, the instructions say I tighten this down until these two walls are touching this post but not tight. This is the point when an intelligent person would go sit down and take a break, because this is the first time the instructions said I need 2 people, and my son-in-law had to leave, said he'd be gone about an hour to take my grandson to practice. So I can either stop, or I think it's probably not that heavy. I've got to stand this up, and it's going to pivot on these rounded points right here. Let me just see. I think it's great that Woodland Mills advises 2 people to do that, but it was actually easier than I thought. Next step is installing the rear post. We've got 2 holes here and 2 holes in the post, but this step tells me to only put the bottom bolt in, so I think this other hole will attach more than just these pieces. Same bolts as last time, still going in from the inside, still 2 washers. And once again, we're just going to snug this. Okay. First time I got confused was on these spacers. I had to go back to the original list of what came. There's a 5mm, 12mm, and 20. On this long bolt, we're using the 12mm, we're using a 5mm down here, and the 20s are for later. So, we got the long bolt, spacer, then we got the pulley, and it has a snap ring on it. You have to put the snap ring facing in so that your washer still sets flat. Yeah, this diagram was just a little bit hard to see on this. So on this bottom bolt below the pulley, that's where you're using the thinnest spacer. It's a 5mm. And then the bracket slides over it. And then your washer and your nut. And then we've got a shorter M12 by 35 bolt. This little bolt is the first thing that's came in from the outside. Everything else has come from the inside out. If you noticed, it's got a little bit dark since the last shot in the video. Same thing that happened when I was putting together the mill stand. I lose track of what day it is and where I'm supposed to be, and I had to take my daughter to cheerleading. But I'm pretty determined this is going to get finished today. Luckily, I don't have a lot of neighbors to complain about me being out here late. Bolting this tank on is pretty straightforward. 4 bolts, 4 nuts.
And as soon as I finished putting this on, I realized I had it flipped upside down, and I turned it around off camera.
Next step. And it feels like we're getting close. Although I know we haven't hooked up the cables for the height adjustment yet. Next step is the battery. In terms of the battery to use, it's got measurements for the battery that will fit inside this box. And then it says 250 cold cranking amps minimum, 300 recommended. This lawnmower battery is the exact size of these measurements here, which is probably not a coincidence. And it has 350 cold cranking amps. There's a bolt right here that they've designated for your ground cable to the battery. It's already got 2 connections on this bolt. They do include the bolts for the terminals. We've got negative, and the battery is connected. Nice and easy. And As I said earlier, the reason I went with this is I like that it's all enclosed. Feeling a little bit guilty. This one piece here is already scratched up. Gosh, don't even have it put together and I'm already abusing it. The routine here feels pretty similar. Leave everything loose. This entire thing is all still loose. We've got 4 of the same bolts we've been using, and then one longer one with a 20mm spacer and a pulley behind it. This right here is why everything's still loose. You'd never get anything together if you tighten them up. Now we will snug everything on this section. Next step is installing the hour meter. And it's kind of a cool thing. When I saw this, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to run wires down or something, but it doesn't work that way. It's vibration based. So this panel is gonna vibrate enough that it can tell it's moving, and that's how it records. Now, one Woodland Mills sawmill I visited last week, his still said 0, because he didn't know you have to cut this little wire before it starts working. But anyway, there's 2 little screws with washers and nuts that attach this. Next, we have our log lift crank handle, and this one uses one of the same bolts that we've been using on the bottom. And then a longer one on the top with a pulley, just like we have been. Very familiar, repetitive process for the assembly of this. Everything's kind of done the same way, which makes sense. So this one is pretty similar, but the difference is it has a 150mm bolt because there are 2 pulleys on this bolt. And now that that's in, this little bolt is already in the other end of this arm, so we'll go ahead and attach that. Next is our cables. Each side of the mill head already has a cable attached to a bolt here, and we just have to route it to where it goes. Over this pulley. And we come down to this lower pulley, the bottom of these 2 stacked pulleys. The lower pulley here. So each cable has 2 flange nuts. You're going to take the back one off, and these 2 are going to connect to a little eyelet here that sets your cable tension. Right now we're just putting them on but not tightening them. Hey, we got to open the cabinet for the first time. Just to bolt the scale on. It's got 2 little bitty bolts that are already on it. They go through here. Next step, you just got this little plastic piece that clamps in here. Then we attach this, which is a log height indicator. A lot of people are doing a free upgrade from Woodland Mills to a different style of this that gives a more clear reading of your height. But that's something to worry about another day. Okay. Boy, we're so close to the end, I can taste it. Tastes like that oak log that we cut up yesterday. Next is the push handle. No washers with this, just bolts and nuts. This is adjustable positioning. You won't know till you're standing there using it how you want it. So we're just going to go ahead and lock it down here. Probably a big determining factor on the angle of this handle will be how tall you set your mill up. If you've got it on the ground, it's going to feel different than mine that's 32 inches up. Actually, the way we did the legs, it may be 35 inches.
The next step was bolting on the lever that engages your blade, and for some reason I didn't have anything to say about that.
Okay, now we got a handle for the blade guide. We have 2 steps left and then we're setting this thing on. So we got one tube that goes from the lubrication tank down to here. And then the second hose goes from here down to the blade. These things are enormous and I don't have a wrench that big. I might go get a wrench tomorrow this big. But for right now, we're going to get it just tight enough to get it set in. Good. Yeah, keep going slowly. But it's going to turn itself for us. Yeah, it's high enough. I just don't want to hit that pole. So I can, yeah, I can come out. Alright, I'm going to restart. Just go up. Okay, I'm going to try to line these back 2 on first, so go slow. Well, I wouldn't say that was easy, but we did it in a day. And basically for me, this has been a 2-day process. 1 day to build the stand, 2nd day to set the mill on it. Now, there was a day in between when all I did was apply this Thompson's water seal to the stand. But tomorrow, we're gonna mill that first log. I am really excited about it. I think the way I've set this up on the stand at this height, as a guy who's getting older and has a little bit of back problems, this is going to be really comfortable for me. And especially since I have the ability to lift even large logs up this high. So, really impressed with Woodland Mills that there's 1,000 pieces to this. And there wasn't a single thing that was missing or mislabeled or anything that wasn't accurate in the instructions. So, really impressed and can't wait to start putting it to use. So, I appreciate you taking time to watch the video. Put links on the screen to more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.